Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. So with 3.8 wrapping up the final chapter of Genshin Impact as well as Sumeru as a region, I wanted to do one last tier list to wrap up the pre-Fontaine meta. So as we're all aware, 4.0 is looming around the corner, and likely what's going to happen is we're going to see a shift in terms of the meta. And sorry guys, you'll have to forgive me, I'm getting over a cold right now, but I did still want to get this video out for you guys before 4.0 hits. Now, this is where we left off back in patch 3.4, which was quite a while ago when I did a tier list like this, and I did do that with my friend Kono, but unfortunately Kono wasn't able to join me for this one. Perhaps for the next one we can have her on again. But really quick, is this you trying to play Genshin Impact on your phone? Well, wallow in despair no longer, for today's sponsor will get your Genshin Impact running buttery smooth with plenty of memory. The Red Magic 8S Pro is an upgrade to the already nearly perfect Red Magic 8 Pro. The 8S Pro comes with the latest version of the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor paired with the Red Core 2 LPDDR5X plus UFS 4.0, which is just a bunch of fancy words for really freaking fast. As we can see, Genshin Impact is running silky smooth at 60 FPS without any issues. And if you're also a fan of Honkai Star Rail like I am, it's running that also extra silky smooth. This thing plays Genshin Impact better than the PlayStation 4. But that's not all, it's got the best specs on the market with up to 16GB of RAM, an improved cooling system, up to 512GB of storage for these ridiculously sized games, and a gorgeous full AMOLED display and so much more. Red Magic continues to upgrade and perfect their software as well with improvements to the shoulder buttons and many more supporting features for when you game. So if you need a top tier gaming phone, just smash that link down below to check it out. Huge thanks to Red Magic 8S Pro for sponsoring today's video. And what's crazy is that since patch 3.4, we have actually only had 5 new characters. Of course, it goes without saying that this is a tier list that I created. I'm literally a guy in a basement making Genshin Impact videos, so please take everything with a giant grain of salt. The first thing that I wanted to actually do is to do some housekeeping on the tiers themselves. I felt like my previous tier list didn't have enough tiers in particular where we could really fit characters, and it felt like the characters were kind of all lumped up a bit too much. So what I've done here is I've added an SS tier at the top and changed the other tiers down one tier to S, A, B, and C tier. And let's talk about each of the tiers. SS tier characters are pretty much characters that you can use every single Abyss cycle, and you are likely to bring out a lot of value from these characters and to do extremely well with these characters. And we've just seen these characters be used so much for so long that, you know, they are going to find a very comfortable home in the SS tier. Now, the S tier characters are going to be extremely good characters that in many ways can be argued to be SS tier, but either they might be a bit more easily countered by certain mechanics and Abyss cycles, or perhaps a little harder to use and not everyone's cup of tea. Now, this is a general free-to-play tier list, so it's important to kind of keep like a bit of skill issue in mind when making these tier lists. Still though, these characters can definitely carry you hard and excel at clearing Abyss 12, especially if they're not completely countered by mechanics in the game. Now up next is A tier. A tier is going to have some great characters, good characters. These characters when built and especially in the proper Abyss cycles will do well and can carry you. However, they're not quite the same powerhouses as the S tier and especially not the SS tier. Finally, we have the B tier, which is going to be home to a bunch of average characters that would say, you know, you can definitely get value out of these characters and make them work, but, you know, you are going to have better characters to choose from. And finally, we have the C tier, which overall is not recommended. Now, of course, Genshin Impact is a fairly reasonably easy-ish game where you can make C tier characters extremely good. But yeah, overall, these are characters that you will see people almost never using. Even if they do have some potential here and there, these are not characters that I recommend investing your resources into. So we're going to do a lot of housekeeping and moving characters around, because we've had a lot more time for the meta to mature, and also I guess this is just going to be completely my opinion without any of Kono's inputs. It's going to be a little bit different, I think. Perhaps when Kono comes back on, we're going to re-butcher this tier list and move things around a lot. But we're going to start with the S tier and SS tier because we've got to fill these out. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the meme Hyperbloom as a character. Hyperbloom is extremely good, but it's not a character. I know it's all fun and games for a little while, but I'm going to actually remove it out. And up next, we're going to populate the SS tier. And there's been one character that's just been completely dominating everything in Genshin Impact since her release, and it is Nahida. Nahida, I think, definitely deserves the top spot as the best character in the game. Will Fontaine change that? I would absolutely love to see what they do to the meta, how the monsters evolve, and how Nahida might actually, you know, not be the best character in the game anymore. But right now, Nahida is just insane. It has been Dendro Impact, and Nahida is the queen of Dendro application. Up next, afterwards, we have Xingqiu and Yelan. Whoever you put in front of the other, I don't really think it matters that much. These two characters are absolutely excellent in every single way, especially with Nahida in any Dendro team and any Pyro team pretty much, any Freeze team. You guys get the point. These two characters have been dominating Genshin Impact, well, in Xingqiu's case since the game's release, and in Yelan's case since whenever she was out, so I don't think anyone's surprised to see them here. The next character in the SS tier is Kazuha. Kazuha, we all know him, we all love him. Probably nowadays the best grouper in the game because of the way that a lot of enemies are and the low cooldown on his skill, the multi-wave content, the fact that he buffs patch damage more than any other character, the fact that he himself is even good in Dendro teams as well. This man does it all. We know him, we love him. He is one of the best characters in Genshin Impact since his release. Afterwards, we have Benny Boy. Bennett unquestionably is still one of the default healers. Everyone uses him, everyone gets him, everyone does a lot of stuff with him. He's even great in unconventional teams like Sunfire Gene. He's great with all the classic teams, you know, Raiden National, International. He's even good in Burgeon teams. This guy, any type of classic team archetype, Bennett is your go-to healer. This is where it's a bit debatable as to whether I should cut off the SS tier, but I think I'm going to actually add a couple more characters to it, with the next one being Raiden. Now you can just see I pretty much just moved a lot of the characters that were at the top of the old S, or well, you know, the old SS tier, now the new S tier, to the SS tier because, you know, these characters have just been excellent ever since the release. Raiden is still an insanely good character, and really she's one of the best Hyperbloom activators in the game. On top of just the standard Raiden National Hyper Raiden, you guys know the drill, and the fact that she's super easy to use is also just an incredible asset for her. The super armor, the energy regen. I don't think anyone's surprised to see her maintain the SS tier spot, so I've decided to actually keep her here. And this is where I'm going to cut off the SS tier for now. So let's do some cleanup for the S tier. Now, a big unfortunate drop, I think, is Venti. He has been struggling for quite a few Abyss cycles, and it's largely because MiHoYo just doesn't make enemies that are Ventiable, if that makes sense, right? Like, so many enemies now are just thick and heavy, and they just stay on the ground. It's so hard to group them with, you know, Venti, and, you know, you can only group once every 15 seconds, so if there's multi-wave content, you can't finish off one wave and suck up the second wave. Venti's dead weight for an entire 15 seconds. He's been struggling a bit, but as always, when there's content that Venti can dumpster, he absolutely just hard counters it. Now, one character that I personally think is extremely good, but the usage statistics just does not back her up, is Sucrose. Now, I think Sucrose is an excellent character, even better than Kazuha in a very few situations, but that's one of the problems, is that Sucrose is just barely better than Kazuha in some very, very limited situations, and because of that, and because no one uses her anymore, which is pretty sad, and because everyone is Kazuha, and you know, you're just going to use Kazuha if you have Sucrose, just because of how insanely easy and good Kazuha is. So I'm actually going to move Sucrose down, and it's a big drop for her, because literally, like, she's at 1% usage rate nowadays, and that is typically seen for like characters in the C tier even. But just because Sucrose is extremely good, and I think because almost at like probably most people have Kazuha now, so they just will always use Kazuha over Sucrose. We have Yae Miko, just a very small tweak. I'm going to move her behind Xiangling. Xiangling is just, you know, always used, or not always used, but Xiangling is used a lot. And by that nature, I'm also going to scoot Fischl right behind Yae Miko as well. And finally, just a tiny little thing, I'm going to move Xiangling above Hu Tao, just because Xiangling is, you know, oftentimes able to do as much damage as Hu Tao can, while also being completely off field. So you can use Xiangling in more teams than Hu Tao because of that. And this one also pains me a lot, but I think it's finally time to move Ganyu down a tier, and I'm going to move her down right behind Venti in the A tier. Ganyu's been one of my favorite characters. She's been holding up really strong for a long time, but unfortunately she's difficult to use, even though she has a very high skill ceiling, as well as you know, with teams like, okay, let me change that phrasing a little bit. C0 Ganyu has a lot of issues, especially with the more recent, extremely aggressive enemies like the Consecrated Beast and things like that. They do not give you 2.5 seconds to charge up your charge shots and unleash them, and that forces you to use the Zhongli, Bennett, Xiangling, Ganyu combo, which the DPS is good, but it just doesn't compare to things like, you know, a Nahida Melt, or even things, certain other setups with Kazuha and Shenhe, but it's really hard to just get those 2.5 seconds to just unleash your shots all the time with Ganyu nowadays, which is unfortunate. She's still a good character. You can use her in Freeze and stuff, but Freeze is just done better by Ayaka as well as other combinations than Ganyu, but still a good character. That's why she's still in the A tier, right? She's A tier, as a reminder, is still good characters. Alright, so it's time to start moving up characters, and in my old tier list, I wasn't really happy with where I put these 4 Hydro characters that are all extremely powerful, but one issue is that they just have so many overlapping roles and stuff like that, and they just kind of all clump together and amalgamated, and it's difficult for me to like put them in the same tier as Xingqiu and Yelan, who are just honestly a cut above Ayato Child and, you know, perhaps Nilo. So let's start moving some of these characters around. Ayato and Child are definitely S tier characters with this new tier list setup, and personally I think they're better than Yae Miko and Fischl by just a little bit. Hydro is just in such a good place because of bloom reactions and because of various, you know, well, bloom reactions, right? I just said that. I guess I'm repeating myself. And Child International is still an extremely good combination. Which one is better? I mean, Ayato is more Unga Bunga. Child, you have to use your brain a little bit more. So it's kind of up to preference. Personally, I actually think Child's a little bit better than Ayato overall, just because his international team is still extremely good and powerful. So if you're willing to put in the extra effort to make that team work, it's still an insanely good team. But Child is very squishy too, and Ayato is a lot less squishy, so you know what? That's fine. You can just interchange these characters as needed. Now, this is going to be a really hot take from me, but Kokomi, I'm going to move her to the SS tier. That's right. Kokomi has been just such a reliable character. I use her all the time, every time. Her usage rates are through the roof. She's insanely good with Bloom. All Bloom teams, she can be used to great effect. She's insanely good with Nilo teams. She's just an insanely good character. Even if like she's not always the best option for maximizing your damage. She heals so much. She heals everyone so much. She can be a driver as well for teams. Kokomi is just the Hydro healer that you can put anywhere, and she applies a ton of Hydro in a very large AoE for a very long time, and that's why I think Kokomi is such an insanely reliable character. Now, there is an argument to put her in the S tier, which I'm perfectly fine with. She could deserve a spot in the top of S tier, but for me personally, I think Kokomi deserves an SS tier placement, just because, you know, everyone just always uses her. And that's, you know, enough for me. I always use her too. And it just shows that quality of life she provides is unparalleled. Next character is Nilo. So Nilo is one of these characters that just blows stuff up like crazy. If things don't resist Dendro, she will just murder them. And now that we have a lot more options for Nilo teams, that we have, you know, Nahida as well as Baizu, as well as a bunch of new Dendro characters, and Nilo is just an insanely good character. Like I said, if they don't resist Dendro, Nilo is going to blow them up. There's no other way to put it. And we have better options for keeping Nilo teams alive as well now. let's start working on the other tiers now. Now, one just tiny little thing is I'm going to move DMC behind Tignari. Personally, I just feel like Tignari is a bit of a better character than DMC, but you know, it's just such a minor movement. I'm not even going to really elaborate much on it. Up next though, we have our boy Ito as well as Geo as a whole. And I just think Geo's just not been in a good spot lately. I mean, there's just not really any mechanics that they counter. They don't really do well with breaking elemental shields. Ito's damage output is still good and solid at Constellation 0, but both him and Albedo are suffering from the same issue, is that Geo just does not have a spot in the meta lately. And I largely blame this on, you know, MiHoYo's enemy creation and the enemies that are in the game. I'm hoping to see them improve in the Fontaine patch, but for now, I'm scooting them down to the bottom of the A tier. A few more small adjustments is I'm going to move Kaching right above Sino, and I'm going to move Yoimiya right in front of Kaching. I do feel like these characters are reasonable DPS characters, and that's why they're still sitting in the A tier. But we're going to move a lot of characters in the A tier round, so you're going to see like just kind of how big of a shift it is, and you know, hopefully it will make a bit more sense after we finally finish moving everyone around. Quick little thing, I'm going to move Rosaria behind the Geo boys, and finally, this is one that pains me, but I'm going to move Eula to the bottom of A tier. Eula has just been pretty clunky to use, and unfortunately Mika was not the savior that Eula needed. Eula still needs a good Electro support, and as sad as it is, Eula's best team is still a Hyper Bloom team, which, you know, any character can be run with Hyper Bloom. Of course, Eula still does contribute more than most other random characters that you can slot in a Hyper Bloom team, so there's that going for her, but, you know, Eula, a bit of an old DPS character, clunky energy issues, things like that, really needs a great Electro support for her. But for now, she's fine, I think, in the bottom of A tier. Now, another quick little adjustment is Xiao behind Sino. People aren't using Xiao as much. Now, I don't think Xiao's bad. He's still in the A tier. This is just a very small kind of horizontal shift for Xiao. It's not like I'm moving him down a tier. Okay, so now we're actually going to start shifting a lot of characters down. And I'm going to move Thoma, Beidou, and Collei down to the B tier. And the reason for this is, I mean, you know, Collei just has her issues. Beidou is super situational. You have to have two enemies to really make her work well. And finally, Thoma, Burgeon is still good, and it's actually in a reasonable spot right now, but people aren't really playing it, and, you know, Thoma just, he can only be used in Burgeon teams, and nowadays, Dendro has kind of evolved beyond, you know, Burgeon teams and things like that. Perhaps if someday we see a buff to Burgeon, we can see Thoma rise a bit. But right now, you know, just some issues with Burgeon and it just not being as good as the other top tier options. I think I'm going to put it here along with Beidou and Collei. Alright, so another character that I feel like I underrated back in the day is Mona. Mona's been seeing reasonable usage rates for a while now, which is a bit surprising to me, but I'm definitely going to have to trust the communal usage of Mona a bit more. And if you really think about it, if you don't have Kokomi and if you don't have like some other Hydro applicators, Mona is actually an exceptional off-field Hydro applicator as well as a big damage amplifier. Now, one character that I personally have been loving a lot is Jean. Jean, Sunfire variants and things like that, but still, you know, we're talking about a small horizontal shift for Jean, not like a huge change in replacement. Okay, and now we have a lot of changes to the B tier. This tier has been overcrowded for quite a while now, and while in theory, like some of these characters can definitely still remain in here, but I just feel like there's just always better options when it comes to a lot of these characters that I'm about to move. So I'm going to move a lot of them real quick, moving Lisa to the top of the C tier. Then we're going to put Layla behind her. Yanfei, unfortunately, no one uses her anymore, and I can definitely see why. And Diluc, our poor boy Diluc, just sadly, you know, honestly, his DPS is pretty mid nowadays, and he's really not good for anything else. And we have Noelle as well. You know, Geo's just really in a bad spot right now. And Ningguang, I'm also going to scoot down. Even behind Dory, sadly. And finally, Sayu. Sayu, while I personally like using her with meme teams with Dory, you know, no one uses her and I can see why. And there's just better options for various Quicken teams than Sayu. And let's see, what else? I do think that Animo Traveler is a bit better than, for example, some of these other options. So I'm going to scoot her up a little bit. But we can see here that, you know, a lot of these characters just people aren't using anymore, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. I think some of these characters do have some potential. Now, one other character I think I want to move is actually Razor. Our poor boy Razor just has nothing going for him nowadays. Physical's not in a good spot, and for any type of Quicken / Hyperbloom team, you just have better options than Razor. One last tier list, very minor adjustment, is I'm going to move Sara above Goro, mainly because just Gio's not in a good spot right now, and perhaps by now some free-to-play players have managed to get a Constellation 6 Sara, which definitely elevates her when used with the Raiden Shogun or other Electro DPS characters like, for example, Yai Miko or Official. So just a very small tweak for Sara. Alright, so that wraps up all the tier list adjustments. Up next, we're going to talk about the 5 new characters who have been released, which have been, I think, Dea, Baizhu, Kaveh, Mika, as well as Kilala. And going in order, we have Dea's release. Now, our poor girl Dea really just got screwed by MiHoYo. Like, MiHoYo's like, we're going to make the worst possible 5-star character in the game. You know, at least she was featured for a little bit. Now she's in the standard banner. Dea's just been struggling to make her impact in Genshin Impact. You know, her interrupt resistance, ignore thing, or her super armor thing. You just use a shield, guys. Her power application is poor. Her damage is poor. Our poor girl Dea just can't catch a break. Now, will she have some potential in Fontaine, especially with, you know, HP sapping mechanics seeming to be more prevalent? Perhaps, and I would hope to see her rise in the future. And, you know, there's a lot of characters that are suffering from the Kuki syndrome, and I believe Dea is definitely one of those characters that perhaps in the future we can see a rise from her. But as of today, sadly, she is just struggling in Genshin Impact. Now, the next character is Mika. No one's surprised to see him in the special tier, which is just for special supports, but unfortunately, I think he's one of the worst special supports in the game. And there's just so many issues with using him with Eula, who is the character that you'd want to use him with, and that's really unfortunate because, you know, well, Mika seems like he'd be a character that was built for Eula, and he doesn't even support her all that incredibly well due to the myriad of issues. You guys can go, you know, see various Mika videos to figure out why. And besides, you know, Eula, there's no physical DPS in the game. In the future, when we do have a physical DPS meta, I can definitely see Mika shining, but as of today, that day has not come. Up next, we have 3 new Dendro characters, with Baizhu being the newest 5-star character that we actually got quite a while ago. But Baizhu is actually just a really solid character. He's just such a great quality of life character that just does Dendro impact well. He provides a very nice damage boost to all Dendro characters, or, well, okay, all Dendro reactions, and he just is a great shielder, great healer. He will sustain your team incredibly well, and as such, I'm going to put him in the S tier right behind Zhongli. I feel like these two characters are very similar in function, but you would just use them for different teams. Like non-Dendro teams will use Zhongli, and Dendro teams will use Baizhu, and it's really that simple. If you need healing and sustain, Baizhu is the GOAT of it in terms of Dendro as an element, and right now he really doesn't have much competition in that regard. Then we have Kaveh as well as Kilala. Now these two characters are okay, but people aren't using them, and I think it's largely, honestly, due to a power creep issue. We have just other Dendro characters that we've already built. Like, for example, we have DMC, who, you know, most people have built DMC by now, and they're just going to use DMC for off-field Dendro application. And we have Yao Yao, who also heals as well. We have the 5-star Dendro characters, which I don't really need to talk about in too much detail. So sadly, just because of an overcrowding of kind of roles for Kaveh and stuff, it's not that he's bad, but I just feel like he's pretty mid. He kind of feels like he has about as much impact as Collei does. You know, you can just use off-field Collei instead of Kaveh in so many situations. And yeah, he is okay on Nilo Bloom teams and stuff, but his Dendro application isn't great either. But still, you know, he's just a reasonable average character in my opinion. And up next we have Kilala. Kilala is okay. I feel very similarly with her as I do with Kaveh. I don't really feel like she adds a whole lot that the other Dendro characters don't already add, because only having a shielder has issues because you will still take damage even with a shield, and at that point oftentimes you still need a healer. So if she can't really replace that healer role, we have that as an issue for a lot of teams that you might use Kilala on. Now she's actually reasonable and solid, and she has a lot of good Dendro application options, especially at Constellation 4. I really like how she can apply Dendro while off field, but again, I just feel like you just have better Dendro application options than Kilala. So yeah, this is my final 3.8 tier list. I do think it would look quite a bit different had Kono was able to join me for this one. But let me know what you guys think about it. I decided to focus a bit more on Abyss 12 usage statistics from 3.5 all the way up to 3.8. And also along with some of my own personal opinion in terms of the characters, as well as looking a bit into the future for how I think a lot of these characters will perform down the road. Now, we haven't changed the Amber tier. Sadly, it's so funny. Poor Aloy, I just wanted to mention that, you know, she's just been used at 0%. Like forever. I mean, we should rename this to the Aloy tier, honestly. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to rename this to Aloy. I don't even know if I spelled her name correctly. If I did, I guess I'm sorry, Aloy, but personally, I'm really curious to see how the meta changes in 4.0, and perhaps maybe around like 4.8 or 4.6, I'm going to do like a little reflection back on previous metas and my previous tier lists, especially at the end of kind of each region, to look at them and to just kind of see how the metas evolved. If that's a video you'd like to see in the future, do let me know down in the comments below. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to a whale/speedrunning tier list. I do want to get to that sooner or later, but honestly, lately I haven't been speedrunning as much just because it's been so time consuming. I've also been working on Honkai Star Rail. I've been sick, and just a lot of stuff has been going on in my life. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. Anyway, as always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.